Good evening. This is the Natural Resource Inventory and Mapping Committee, and with us today we have two guests, Jeff Parsons and Michael Lou Smith with Arrowwood. Ryan Oates and myself on the board, and we're talking about phase 2 of the Natural Resource Inventory and Mapping tonight. Did you folks have something you wanted to start out with? Or is this more of a question answer format?
Yeah, we don't really have a presentation or anything. I think it's more of a kind of question answer and kind of kick off this phase and what we need, from each other to make it happen.
Okay. So if we could just start with the summer visits, the questions we had were, how do we, in your experience, what works as far as contacting landowners to get permission? I know a lot of people might be really concerned about what's this going to mean for my property and that sort of thing. And you both are experienced at this, and we'd love to hear what you think is the best approach there.
Yeah. So there's kind of two different real approaches to, getting landowner permission. And, the problems that we've had in the past have been that it can be kind of a real bottleneck for the whole process of getting boots on the ground. And because it's so time consuming, and like you say, there are challenges with getting people actually to say yes. And so the kind of two-pronged approach that we take now is one is that we, Jeff and I, like we've discussed, will identify certain parcels that we think would be really important to visit based on our phase 1 inventory. And so we'll basically look at the inventory that we've done so far, and based on what we see on the ground in terms of potential wildlife habitat or natural communities and wetlands and things like that, we will identify some parcels that we think would be really important to visit. Because it's kind of a cross-section of parcels, and oftentimes it's parcels that are larger, and so kind of larger landowners, it's actually getting permission for these is kind of hit or miss. And so the second approach that we have folks take is to actually, on your end, reach out to people that you think might be amenable to the project. People that that have parcels of land that are conservation minded, and would be really excited, or anywhere from excited to ambivalent about us visiting. And if you contact them and get permission, then that can also be really valuable for us to visit for a couple of reasons. One is that in some cases, if we just do Jeff and I identifying the parcels, sometimes we might not end up with hardly any sites to visit, right? And so it kind of gives us more options for places to go. The second reason is that you never know what you're going to find, right? And sometimes we're really surprised. Like, we wouldn't have identified this, particular parcel just by looking at the remote data, but when we get there, we find some really interesting things. And so those are the kind of the two approaches that we like to take for getting permission. So do you have any kind of questions about that? And once kind of we work through that, then I can talk more about how you convince people, or what you would say, or the approach for actually contacting people.
Yeah, I think we've talked a bit about finding receptive landowners, and I think, we're on board with finding those, especially if they have a pretty large parcel, because then, is it reverberating for you? Are you good?
It is,
It
but
sounds,
I can.
Okay. Um, yeah, so we're on board with doing that, and if it's large parcels, it seems like you might have a variety of different natural communities to consider or use for verification, that sort of thing. So, yeah,
right.
what you find doing that, it really was what you just said that we were looking for guidance on, how do you sell it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
one one thing that occurred to me is that um, people are always kind of freaked out that, oh, if you find a vernal pool, then I'll never be able to subdivide or whatever. But in Underhill, you often the development review board asks people to get specialists to map out certain places. So in a way, what you're doing could be more helpful to them because they've already got an idea of what the areas
Right.
are. Do you think that's
Yeah.
a valid way to approach it?
It is. I mean, and that's one thing I tell people a lot. I had an interesting experience being on one end of it, in that there's an inventory that we aren't doing, but I've had friends and people that I know saying, "Hey, Michael, what do you think about this? I had someone the town contact me about this," and I tell them the same thing, even if we are conducting inventory, and that is that um, any feature that we find, like if you have a large wetland on your property, it's already regulated, right? Like you just because the town, it's not on like some town map, doesn't mean that it's not regulated, right? And so it's not like um, we're increasing the regulation or increasing or decreasing what they can actually legally do with their parcels, right? Um, Basically what we're doing is, like you mentioned, is that we're giving them the information up front. And so, um, in a lot of other circumstances, they might have to even pay for these services. Like if the town of Underhill says, oh, well, you need a wetland delineation for this, so you need to do an inventory, they're going to have to pay someone to come out and do it, right?
Right.
Whereas because it's part of this project, the project is picking up the cost.
Yeah.
Michael, can I clarify?
Yeah.
It, is that always the case, or is there the possibility, in particular, in the case of rare plants that aren't already on the state's database? Um,
Um, right.
why don't
It
you
is,
talk
but
about that a
we're
little?
not. Yeah, yeah. So, right. If there were a rare or threatened or endangered species of plant that was found, then it certainly would um, kind of instigate some other regulation that wasn't there before. Um, but we're not conducting rare plant inventories. It's kind of beyond the scope of the project, and so that's not. I just don't really see it as an issue. You know.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that. On the wildlife habitat end of things, um, it's very unlikely that we're going to encounter an endangered species of wildlife while doing the field work. That being said, the habitat in which they live um, is something we're going to be mapping largely remotely, or the state has already done that, or the town has already done that anyways. So it's not,
You're not talking about rare wildlife, though, right? You're talking about
right,
significant. Okay, yeah.
right. But I
Yeah.
mean, how many times in my 38 years of doing this have I encountered an endangered species of wildlife that wasn't known, about a piece of land before I went there? It's very, very, very rare.
Has it ever happened?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I remember one. Yeah,
I've
right.
spent a little time down in is it Orwell? There's a piece of state land down there where there's just all kinds of rare species, snakes that you don't find anywhere else and stuff. And I think there's a four-toed skink or something like that?
Oh yeah,
Um,
the two-line skink. Yeah.
yeah. So, place like that, you probably have all kinds of other rare species, and if you find another one, it's like, oh, okay, there's another one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just
10
very
layers
unusual.
of regulation instead of 9.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, those are real helpful things to know. I think that really helps to focus on what is being done. The wetland stuff, the vernal pools, the all of those kind of restrictions are already regulated. You aren't doing rare plants. Wildlife habitat is important, and you'll be looking at that, but it doesn't mean that the species are there necessarily.
Right. And
No,
wildlife habitat is only really regulated if a project is going through Act 250 or Section 248 or, you know, it's a much larger kind of development type project. Um, and so like subdivisions or like a small house being built or whatever, those generally aren't, uh, wildlife habitat doesn't get regulated on that level.
unless
Okay,
it's a town ordinance.
Right. Right.
okay. And I don't think we have a lot of those in Underhill that I'm aware of.
Hmm.
So
Um,
back to this summer,
okay.
unless you
Yeah.
still have questions.
So yeah, the summer work is, you know, the primarily probably the natural community kind of wetland field verification that we're doing, and that's a small piece of the puzzle for this. Most of the field work, I think, based on what you folks in Underhill wanted to see, most of the field work is really wildlife habitat type field work. Um, and so I'm going to be doing the natural community and wetland field work, and then Jeff is going to be doing the wildlife habitat assessment. And
Okay.
so the natural community stuff that'll happen this summer slash fall. Um, and I'll let Jeff speak to the kind of timing of the wildlife habitat stuff.
Sure. There are a couple of different components to the wildlife habitat assessment. Of course, there's a remote component that will happen when Michael's natural community mapping work is done, and that'll be done
Yeah.
by our GIS, IT person who's also a fairly good wildlife biologist. Um, that will be done. I'm not exactly sure, Michael. Is that going to be done
Yeah,
in
that's
like,
already that. Well, so that a lot of that is done. There is some additional wildlife habitat remote kind of like the feature, like the habitat features, so ledges and bare wetlands and stuff like that. That's going to be done later in the fall slash early winter.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
will include things like categorizing deer yards based on their likelihood to be utilized by deer, which we've been doing in town natural resource inventories recently. So not treating every single evergreen based forest community is equally good to overwintering deer, but looking at species composition, which of course Michael's work will aid in that aspect, whether it's a north facing slope or a south facing slope or east or west, um, and probably also, sort of some indication of how close to human activities it is. Um, the um, so the field work itself is got two components. One of which requires a fair amount of snow on the ground, and it helps if the weather conditions are such that tracking on roadsides is good. So we tried to do roadside tracking to identify where wildlife is crossing on your roads. And I know we have at least, I believe, 2 days worth of wildlife roadside tracking. We actually have an app on our phone, and we mount the phone, and I drive around and tap deer when I cross a deer track, or bobcat when I cross a bobcat track. Um, so you'll be seeing me this winter pulled over to the side with my flashers on. Maybe I can borrow a four-wheel drive this time. It's always a challenge doing this with my little two-wheel drive car, but I've been doing it for a long time. So um, I believe that part of this process will involve our IT fellow, Aaron Worthley, also mapping potential wildlife corridors based on land use in your town. And we will use this field data to support or lend credence to, or in some cases, suggest that maybe these corridors aren't as prominent or as well used as one might think, given the land use and the density of humans there. The latter, where we discard a corridor because of lack of seeing tracks, is not likely to happen because we're just taking maybe two snapshots, out of a winter's worth of wildlife travel. So it's more likely to support and uh, give us information about the species composition using these connections on the landscape between what we've mapped as your forest blocks. The second part of the field work will involve deciding which parcels to visit based on a number of different factors, including the diversity of the landscape. In other words, are there wetlands, hardwood communities, evergreen communities, ledge communities that I can visit in a day on a parcel that we feel may be, important uh, in and of itself, or perhaps representative of the forest block that we're working within. Um, the if it's a 300-acre northern hardwood parcel that doesn't have much variety, um, it may be less useful for us to spend 6 or 7 hours snowshoeing or skiing across this parcel if we're really not seeing much, as you know, can happen in these big northern hardwood forests that don't have much variety in them. That being said, we'll probably want to visit one of those and ski through them to show the absence of wildlife. But um, we're really going to be looking for you know beach stands if that's possible, in conjunction or close combination with stream corridors and wetlands and evergreen forest, interesting evergreen forest, not necessarily the more simple, white pine plantations, but something with some interest, spruce fir swamps or hemlock forests that are, probably being used by white-tailed deer. So, we may put a little emphasis on the deer yard evaluations to see if we can see any differences in use by slope. Is it steep or is it north facing versus south or west facing? And so it'd be interesting to see if in Underhill, if our assumptions, bear fruit about where we're most likely to see wildlife in the winter. So it's those types of factors that will factor into which sites I'll visit. Um, weather will enter in. We'll want to visit those sites as well as doing the road tracking when it's most appropriate. You don't want to do, an inventory of a site after 36-inch fresh snowfall, because wildlife probably won't be moving much, and we won't be moving that much on snowshoes to get into our sites. So the sites will be chosen and the dates will be chosen based on, when we have a series of places we want to go and we know that the venturing in the winter time, when you can actually see signs of wildlife, can be best accomplished. And that's why we're largely, pushing this towards the winter months because, I work in the field all summer long and I can go 6 weeks between seeing a white-tailed deer in the woods, but in the winter, if the conditions are right, you can really see the sign of wildlife. Not so much for black bear, of course, um, and in harsh conditions, not so much for any of the species. Although that may be when you want to visit a protected ledge site and catch a fisher napping in the back of a broken ledge or something like that. But
Cool. Couple couple questions about that. We have a lot of sugar bushes. Whoop. Are you still there?
Yep.
yep,
Oh,
we're both here.
something happened to my screen. Oh, there. Um, we have a lot of upland sugar bushes, and some of them have good road networks and that sort of thing. But I just wonder how much that hinders your mobility and that sort of thing. Would it pay to um, make sure we know with the landowner, like where the paths are that are easiest to travel, that sort of thing? Or
No, I don't think that makes too much of a difference. We can get around anywhere.
okay,
That being
this
said,
Yeah.
we probably don't want to visit a lot of large sugar bushes without much variety. Okay.
sure.
I think in my experience, the sugar bushes can be, fairly simple, just like these large northern hardwood forests without much topographic and stream courses and wetlands and and conifers mixed in with them. So, and those tend to be what sugar bushes are. So, Michael, do you
Yeah,
agree or?
Yeah, but I also I I wouldn't necessarily um, go out of your way to think about it on that level. Um, because there may be in the sugar bush there you may find a bunch of vernal pools or some cool ledges or something like that. So I would not exclude areas because you think that it's all just one thing. Like if you know of someone that is willing to is interested in having us come, um then sign them up. I should say, however, that depending on what level of response we get in terms of parcel permission, we may not be able to even visit them all.
Right.
So if you have, a bunch of people that are really excited about the project, but say they've got, 10 acres and it's hard, it doesn't, and like our priorities might be elsewhere. And so we can't necessarily promise that we're going to get to every site.
Right. And you definitely don't want to promise.
Right. Yeah. So.
We don't want a lot of disappointed people. So.
Right.
Right.
Just another question about that. I noticed in your list of natural communities, you have a number that would only be found on Mount Mansfield. Um, I think there's been a lot of inventories on Mount Mansfield, so I guess my feeling is that we want to keep it out of the state forest land and have you concentrate on the rest of the town. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And I was going to mention that as well. I think that, yeah, the state land, they've done a lot of inventory on it. I've done a lot of inventory on that state land. And so this is the opportunity to step outside of that and get some of the private lands. So yeah, let's focus on that.
Ryan, did you have any questions on this topic?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I think this has covered it well.
Okay.
I,
So
I,
at this point, Jeff and I are looking at parcels that we think would be good to visit. And we are going to compile that list and we can probably get that to you next week. Do you, I guess the one question is, well, two questions. Have you got a list of parcels or landowners that you are going to contact? Well, let's start with that question. And if so, is it something you can share with us, or is that something that you're still working on?
I would say sort of. I think each of us has in our minds people that we'd like to contact. We haven't done that yet because we wanted to meet with you first and make sure we were going to tell them the right things.
Yeah.
I think we could probably come up with that in a week's time, at least some initial locations.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't know if it makes sense to get a list from Arrowwood first, and then see if there's any overlap. And then we could send them parcels back as well that they may not have identified, but would be helpful for them. I don't know. We could do it either way, I guess, right?
Yeah. Right. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter all that much. If we had, I think it'll all come out in the wash. It's useful for us to have it before your list beforehand, but it's not necessary. And so let's just proceed like this: that Jeff and I will get you a list next week, and then your team can also kind of be working on a list, and maybe you can also share that with us next week or whenever you can get it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And is there a certain are you looking for a certain size of parcel? Is it dependent on size or diversity? Or I know it would depend on diversity, of course, but is there a site that's too small?
Well, I mean, like a bunch of 10-acre parcels are hard for us, just because there's only 10 acres, right? And it's oftentimes you don't find a lot. And so obviously I would say the larger the better. But I wouldn't also wouldn't put any hard and fast rules on it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
How soon are you thinking, like what's the soonest you would be wanting to do field visits?
Probably September.
Okay. All right. So we have time to compile this and get our ducks in a row then.
Yes. Yep.
A couple of, if we can move on to other topics. Are we
Yes.
set with that? I wanted to talk a little bit about the contract, and one thing that we hadn't really settled on was final presentations. And what we learned from uh, some of the people, I think it was in Richmond or Bolton or something, where they'd done natural resource inventories and then hadn't had enough interpretation of the information so that in the end, the results just sit on a shelf. And we don't want that to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
we'd like to have you all provide that interpretation in the form of presentations to, the committees or the public or whatever. Um, we didn't build that into what the proposal we had asked the select board for, but
Yep.
in talking with Karen, she's the head of our conservation commission. Um, we were wondering if we could ask you to do those in July or so of 2024 and have a separate contract for just the presentation part.
Oh, okay.
That way
Um,
she can come up with some funds through Conservation Commission to actually pay for that part of it.
oh, okay. Yeah. That's certainly, yep, that'll work. I was just this afternoon working on the budget to try and, shuffle things around so we could work it into the final presentation into the current one. But if you, um, that's a much better option, I think, if that would work on your end. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it doesn't rush you to have to get it done by the end of June, then we have
Right.
some time and flexibility on the date for something like that.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, One question I have about in your report, you talk about prioritizing blocks, and I want to just make sure I understand. You have a number of forest blocks. I don't know, there might have been 23 or something that were numbered. And in your mind, those are considered our priority forest blocks?
So those
Yes,
are all the forest blocks.
right.
They're all the forest blocks. Okay.
There
Yeah.
are a few woodlots that fell under the minimum acreage that
Okay.
uh, as a town you can still call them forest blocks if you want. But read the report and you'll see that we drew a minimum acreage and why we did that, and then you can decide yourself.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
And that information would be in the appendix in the methodology, like
Yeah.
the acreage that we. Yeah.
Right.
So in phase two, when you're finished, do you think you can rank the forest blocks in terms of uh, um, natural resource significance, or how? I know what's going
Well,
to happen when we get to the planning commission and actually using this. They're going to say, okay, you have all of these forest blocks. Which ones are most important and which ones are least important. Is that something that you would be working on?
We can work on it, but we've discovered over the years that um, just using sort of a numerical comparison gives people the idea that they can take the lower ones and eliminate them or impact those. And we've come to discover, and I think the state natural resources, various programs have also concluded that sure, you have these very large ones that are very important, but the smaller ones are often just as important or more important for people to actually witness and view and recreate with in those smaller blocks. And so they're very important socially in terms of garnering protection for forest block protection, which is ultimately the protection of wide ranging wildlife, and natural communities. And one of the other things that we've discovered is many of the smaller blocks are often closer to non-wilderness areas, and they may play important roles as stepping stones for the movement of wildlife between the larger blocks. And so we may be able to say these are the really big important ones for female breeding black bear. And if you feel that's important, then protect them. But if you also feel that the movement of black bear from the east to the west part of town, across Pleasant Valley and Route 15 and things like that, are important to you or to your town, that the protection of these smaller forest blocks where bear probably do not breed, but they move across the landscape to maintain bear throughout your town and to maintain the genetic diversity of the species, which is really important for the long-term permanence of species like that. So we would couch anything that we did in those type of terms rather than a straightforward numerical assessment with the bottom five meaning destroy.
Yeah,
The top five meaning preserve at all costs.
Yeah.
We just
yeah,
shy away
Right.
from doing
Right.
that, and I think you probably understand why now, or you
Hmm.
did before I started talking. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Good.
certainly the data will be there to support, identifying ones that are especially important. And I think Jeff's point is a good one, and that doesn't mean that the other ones aren't. But you will have the data there.
right, and it's your battle with your town and the people in your town who would not see the importance of these areas. That's your battle. We will give you the ammunition to continue to protect these areas, but it'll be up to you. That being said, we are going back to towns and having to support the data that we produce, and we're always willing to do that and to support your town with the data that we produce. But you're the first ones in line, and are going to be the first ones experiencing, people who want to and destroy, or not necessarily destroy, impact, change, alter, negatively impact these areas.
Yeah, there's landowner rights kind of thing. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
they want to subdivide, but they just want the possibility of
yeah.
being free and easy about it.
We both live in the Northeast Kingdom. We know all about that.
Uh, um, I know we've talked about this before, Michael, but there are locations that we know of that didn't really appear on your map, that we'd like to make sure you know about, whether or not you can categorize them one way or the other. how should we best do something like that? Try to get some
Yeah.
coordinates, or I don't know,
You know what would
print
be
or
what would be
draw a
really
circle around.
helpful?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think as a first blush, what would be really helpful is um, sending me a list of what those things are. And I mean, yeah, even with coordinates, if you can get them. Um, and then, I can look at them, I can look at the map, and then I can come back to you and say, oh, I need more information about this one, or can you clarify this one? But just a simple list to get us going on the process would be really helpful.
All
These are
right.
natural communities.
Well, like there are areas of seeps that, maybe the vegetation over them masks them, but yeah, there's all kinds of larches there or something like that, or
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, or vernal
Yeah,
pools
yeah,
which fall out or that sort of thing. Yeah.
yep, yeah. It'd be good to know. I mean, that's really important information. The kind of local stuff that we can't see from all the remote inventory. It's so yeah, it'd be good to get that from you, and I can it'll get me going on what more I can get back to you about what more information I would need to incorporate it.
Okay. Uh, so you're working on the contract, and you'll just send that to our town office. It's, I think that's
Um,
how you did it before, but
yes, I think we had she's a Jennifer from
yeah,
the town.
Squishy Cats,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So yeah, I will and she's aware that this is a project and that I can just send that.
yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure have her email. Maybe it's on the town webpage.
Um,
Um,
yeah, I don't actually have it in front of me, but yeah, it's on the we have a new website on our town. Oh my gosh.
ooh,
Yeah.
as soon as I get internet, I'll take a look.
Um,
I can.
um,
What I'll do is I'll send it to her and I'll CC you, Sandy, on it.
okay, that sounds fine. Okay, what else should we know, or questions you have, or we're excited.
Yeah, yeah, we are too. It's
So are we.
yeah, like to have uh phase two inventory like this where we can spend a lot of time out in the field in the woods to dig into some of this stuff is really it's the best part, of course. So we're excited as well. Yeah. Um, I don't I don't think I have any other questions or issues to raise at this point. I'm just going to finish up this contract and we'll get that going. And yeah, we'll go from there.
One thing just occurred to me. I don't know if this is at all of interest to you, Jeff, but maybe in the early 90s, we had done a lot of amphibian road crossing, nighttime catches and that kind of thing. Um, and I think all of the maps and data ended up with Jim Andrews down at Middlebury
Yeah.
College. Um,
Okay.
it's older data. Maybe it's not as relevant now because it's been a few years. Um, so I guess I bring that up because you can think about it, and if there's a way to use that, you know, it's always good to use data we have.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll drop
Yeah.
Jim an email and see what he's got and what he can share and what format it's in and everything like that. Even though it's old, it's probably still pretty good. These things probably shouldn't change too rapidly, over a short period of time. So yeah, I'll drop him an email. Good to know.
Okay.
Yeah, we know
Uh,
Underhill hasn't grown at all in the last 15, 20 years.
The last 2 years, you mean?
Oh my God.
Right. Uh,
Terrible. I'm pretty sure the status of that is it's hard copies that need to be
I think.
something done with, and yeah.
Michael
Okay.
traditionally works with Aaron on that aspect of wildlife crossings and stuff. So he'll,
Oh,
like
okay.
like you said, he'll contact Jim and see if Jim can, I don't know, put circles on a map or something, right? If
Yeah,
nothing
or
else.
send us copies of whatever he's got. So yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see.
How about
Okay.
any other work that's been done?
Yeah, the woman that would know about that, Karen, isn't here tonight, but I'm pretty sure Jesse Moore, is that his name?
Yeah,
Jesse,
Oh yeah, Jesse.
yeah,
Yep.
just say more.
I think he did some wildlife stuff, but I don't know the details of it. I'll have Karen send you a note about that.
Was that associated with what's it, the Jericho uh, Army base or whatever that base is that they own up near West Bolton? And
No, Ryan knows about that.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's part of that. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, that doesn't make its way into Underhill, anyways, does it? Or does it
It
to some
does.
extent?
About a third of it
Does.
is in Underhill, and we
Oh,
do.
gotcha.
Yeah, there is some. There's a possibility I can get some data for that as well. So we have. I happen to work there, so that's why I know that. Yeah,
Oh,
there's some
okay. Good.
significant natural communities on there. We've got rental pool data. We've got some other stuff that we could probably share.
Yeah, that would be great if you can share that. We can integrate that into the map.
Okay. I think we have rare plants too.
Nice.
Okay, well, I think we've covered it, but you know
Yeah.
where to find us.
We
Yeah.
know how to get a hold of you if we think of anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. I hope you get your internet back. You know, your life won't seem normal till you're hooked in there again.
I know,
Amazing.
right? It's sad but true. Yeah.
Mm.
So, all right. Well, thanks. It was good talking to you both.
Likewise, and thank you for working on this. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, our
All
pleasure.
righty.
All right.
All
We'll
right.
talk to you
Take
later.
care. We'll be in touch soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.
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 Uh, we're kind of short of people tonight, Ryan.
I
So,
see that. Yeah.
uh,
We get a lot done.
yeah, what should we decide on? Did I forget, did Penny send you all of her notes that she had on so many different things?
She
Yeah.
did. It was very comprehensive, and I think we had all agreed on that certain size of
Yeah.
poly printing that. So I guess does that go through us or Brad or who?
Um, I think she just has to get permission from Brad
Okay.
to do that, and I'll ask her to just do it,
Yeah.
and then
Just I
we'll
mean,
have it for whatever uses we might have in the future.
yeah. I guess there's
Um,
no sense in waiting on doing it, right?
right.
Yeah.
Um, the big tree data form, she had a lot of edits, and I can just work on those. They were all smart things to have done, so
She did.
that was, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Someone was it? Maybe it was. I don't remember who it was. Yeah. Someone said that there was an issue with one of Moore's trees or something. I think we've talked about this before, but I think it was that they came in after our last contest, so they'll be entered into
right,
this I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, and she thought that the deadline was January, and of course we've moved that deadline.
Right.
So,
Okay.
um, yeah, and I contacted Don Toby, and he's interested in doing a joint training. But then he went on vacation for 2 weeks, so I haven't heard back about a date.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it'll probably be early August before we get something going. I was going to suggest we have two trainings, one that's on a Thursday late afternoon associated with the farmers market, and then have another one on the Saturday morning so you can
Yeah.
get different people coming, and have them both at Mills Riverside Park
Okay.
where it's really easy to do it. So I think
Yeah.
he'll do that and talk a little bit about his EAB plan in
Yeah.
conjunction with that. So
Okay. That's a good idea. I watched that. I went back and watched his presentation to the select board on
oh,
his inventory and the, I guess, writing of the ash, whatever it is, ash management plan, or interesting stuff.
it is, yeah. I
Yeah.
haven't seen his intern walking the streets yet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that'll be helpful. Uh, Big tree. What else we got?
Let's see. Where
Training
do I?
outreach. Um, I guess uh, the the information for the website seems like Karen wanted us to put more details, and I was really trying to back away from that for
Yeah.
now.
Keep it simple. Yeah.
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 So I'll just email her back and say, that I'd rather not put a lot of detail, and if she's agreeable, then I'll just send that to Amanda to post. Sound
Okay.
okay with you? Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah. 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 I just got back
Um,
from vacation, so I kind of read
yeah.
everything quickly before the meeting tonight. So
California, is that what you said?
I was in California, and then I got back, and then I drove one of my daughters to Pennsylvania to spend a week with my parents. So
Oh,
um, just got back from there.
I
But
see. Did
yeah,
you miss the floods last week?
I was home for that last week. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah. Unfortunate. Yeah, you guys weren't affected at all, I assume. Yeah, yeah,
No, no.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yes.
was just down in Richmond yesterday for the first time, and there's a lot of damage. Yeah, a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So
I think that, emergency response has learned a lot from Irene, and there were a lot of things in place, like the wrong way bridge up in Cambridge. It was fixed like that, new
yeah,
tar, and
yeah.
and
Someone said they had repaved it already.
yeah,
It might
yeah,
flood again.
yeah. But, well,
Yeah,
we're getting
impressive work. Yeah. So,
okay. Well,
well,
I think
I
that's
took the
all.
minutes, so I'll send those off to
Okay,
Amanda, and
sounds good.
uh,
Thank
I'll
you
do
for
that
doing
tomorrow.
that.